Welcome to the press conference, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Okay. We're here to talk about why the public sector workers are not protected by OSHA, and they should be. They got every right just as well as anyone in the private sector. I used to be an OSHA instructor myself for about 8 years, and some people think OSHA is a bad word, but it's not. Most of it's common sense, like wearing a hard hat when you got overhead steel around you, or tying a ladder off and having it extended 3 foot over the edge. It's just a lot of common sense issues, so you don't have a dumb accident. It isn't something that forces a contractor to spend a fortune to do things right. It's mostly about awareness. I'm Master of Ceremonies, Jack Lee, President of Veery Crawford Central Labor, and we got some guest speakers here. Next, I'd like to call up David Kozubicki for Representative Pat Harkins.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Kozubicki. I work for State Representative Pat Harkins' office, who's the primary on this bill. Pat is actually in Philly as we speak, speaking at another AFL-CIO situation. Pat gave me a few things that he jotted down, and I think we've all heard all this before, but bear with me. Jake Schwab was a mechanic at the Erie Metropolitan Transit Authority, EMTA bus facility in Erie, PA. Jack died as a result of an accident with a bus. He was provided a jack device to lift the bus, which was not intended to lift a heavy bus. Thus, the weight of the bus came down on Jake, crushing him. Tiffany Schwab is Jake's widow, and she has been a driving force, along with us, pushing to get this legislation enacted into law. House Bill 1082 is a fight for safe workplaces and health protections for all workers. This issue is not a Democrat or Republican issue, nor is it a union or non-union issue, but rather a safeguard afforded public sector workers to enjoy the same protections that private sector workers currently enjoy under OSHA standards. If private sector companies and employers can afford to provide safe work environments and safety training to their employees, there is no reason the public sector can't step up and do the same. Currently, 22 states have OSHA system in place. Now, on the brochure we had, you guys had 28. I'm not sure what it is. It's still a low number. But Pat has 22 states have OSHA system in place to provide work environments for the public sector employees. There is no reason why Pennsylvania shouldn't be the 23rd or 29th state with this for our public sector workers. The time for studies and public hearings is over. The time is now to act. With that, just a side note, not that it makes too much of a difference, but I'm a proud 40-year Teamster in the private sector. OSHA, back in the day, was the bad four-letter word that if you can picture a deer in the field eating and hearing something and picking their head up, that's how management used to react to hearing those 4 letters. Now, I can honestly say probably 25 to 30 years, OSHA has not been spoken in our department, only because our company takes care of business. Safety every day. We have safety meetings all the time. If there's a piece of equipment that's bad, all the worker has to do is notify management that it's bad, and they either fix it or they tag it and set it aside until somebody can get to it. That's what the private sector, along with union contracts, has allotted me to stay safe in my workplace, and I don't see why everybody else shouldn't be involved also. The other issue I also wanted to say that Pat wanted to also thank the Erie delegation for their support in this, co-sponsoring this bill from the get-go. It's been way too long. Legislator Rep. Mirsky, Rep. Bizzaro, and Representative Kurt Sonny. The Erie delegation has had Pat's back all through this, and I know he's very appreciative of that. Along those lines, if you would ask every legislator what's more important, a $20,000, $30,000 piece of equipment or the protection of a worker from either getting severely hurt or possibly killed, what do you think those legislators are going to say, especially with media involved? You know what they're going to say. Why aren't they voting for this bill? I'm not a politician. I don't know what goes on down there, but just from my standpoint, it's a no-brainer. This should be taken care of now. We should be moving forward with this and getting everybody protected. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'd like to ask Senator Dan Laughlin to the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a brief history on this bill. Pat Harkins had talked to me about this when I first got elected, and it was the accident was more recent at that point. And I told Pat, I said, Pat, if you can get this bill over to the Senate, I will try and champion it through for you. It's astounding to me that public sector workers don't have the same protections as the private sector. It's usually the opposite, quite frankly. They get, taken care of a little bit better than the private sector most of the time. So I support this bill. I didn't run it in the Senate because out of respect for Pat, I wanted his name to be on the bill that got signed. There's a bill in the Senate right now, a companion bill. It's Senate Bill 464 that was introduced by Senator Tartaglione, and Roseanne has asked me to co-sponsor that, and I intend to. But really the reason that I dragged my feet on it was I wanted Pat's bill to get signed into law, and quite frankly, I still feel that way, but I will co-sponsor the Senate bill, the Senate version, because I know getting it done is more important than who gets the credit for it. And I think that Pat would get credit anyway, but that's the only reason that I had waited for Pat's bill to come over, because I really wanted to help him get it done. And quite frankly, like David had mentioned, I'm really not sure why this bill hasn't moved more quickly. The public sector that would have to comply with the OSHA regulations, it's not even like you're hurting a private mom and pop industry. So this, in my opinion, is almost a no-brainer. We should be able to get this done fairly quickly, and I'm gonna get to work on it for you. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Laughlin. I'd like to call John Renwick.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Renwick. I'm president and business agent of ATU Local 568 in Erie. I represent the bus drivers, the bus mechanics, secretarial staff of EMTA. The namesake, Jake Schwab, for this bill, as everyone knows or should know by now, was a friend of mine and a co-worker. 28 years with the company. Had the lack of that day. I wanted to say, with this anniversary of 9/11, Jake also has an anniversary coming up. It'll be 5 years since his passing, this accident. So, with that said, the equipment that Jake had was not available at the time, and Jake continued to work on it with the company's knowledge. When the insurance company came in and investigated this, we still to this day, Jake's wife Tiffany and myself have no idea what the cause was for this accident. And we still do not have the equipment to this day that Jake needed the day of his accident. We've been working a long time with this bill. Firemen, police, bus drivers, bus mechanics, public workers. No OSHA protection. In this day of age, all we want to do is be treated just like everybody else with OSHA protection. I can tell you on the day it happened, and I might be taking a couple minutes longer. On the day this happened, I knew what the answer was years ago about OSHA coming into our place. But on the day this happened, I called OSHA again. And while I'm crying, talking to OSHA, they're saying, John, we'll try to come up there, but you know we can't come in there. So in the meantime, they have contacted me, and I've talked to them several times. They're not out to fine anybody or to hurt anybody or to make companies or cities or townships go broke. They're just here to teach. They will come in and tell you what you need. They're not going to fine you. They're going to help you. They're going to help train you. And that's what we are asking. Help support Jake Bill 1082, along with our representatives and senators. We can do this with your help. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'd like to call Mike Horniak up now. Mike's a longtime painter and OSHA instructor.
Well, I'd like to say a couple things. First, Jack told you, I've been an OSHA instructor for the locals and for the international. I'm going to give you a little different look on what we talk about when we talk about OSHA. Now you got to remember, I was a painter, so some construction workers have to see visual things to be able to understand them. So have a little visual for us. The first thing is everybody looks and hears in the news and everything about lives matter. When safety, all lives matter. And it shouldn't mean because you work for a certain person in a certain place, you don't have the protections that everybody else does. Everyone should have those same protections. I gotta look at my notes because, again, when you're old and you were a painter, you forget stuff. The thing about OSHA is they talk about standards all the time. And what I want to talk about in the standards is it's the amount of quality. And OSHA creates the standard for safety. There's a lot of people don't know, but there's a couple different sections that are called standards. One's called the construction standard, one's called the industry standard, the other one's called the marine standard. The only problem is, where's the public sector standard? It's missing. I'm going to show you a little visual now. We're going to talk about some stuff, and you're going to probably get a little laugh at it. But we remember some stories that when we were in kindergarten and things like that, and one of those stories was about the three little pigs. Well, this is our little pig. And we're going to say this little pig here built this brick house. So he's going to be the standard. He's going to be good. He's the OSHA standard. He built a nice brick house. He followed the standard. But you know what happened also? It was the guy that built the straw house, okay? And if you look at the straw house, were these guys bad builders? Probably not. But their standards were different. And let's call this standard the public sector standard, right? And along comes, you know who it is, the wolf. And let's call him the accident or a problem, right? Shouldn't we look at saying that the people who have the training and everything else, the OSHA standard kind of saved the house. And if you look at the guy without the OSHA standard, his house is gone. I think all we really want to know is when you and I and everyone else goes to work in the morning, we want to be able to come back to our families just as safe as we were when we started, okay? Why can't the public sector be equal to the private sector in safety? So with these bills, I think we've brought that closer than anything could ever happen. And again, I had to use these boards to explain it to my apprentices. Hopefully they helped out a little visually, showing what we're trying to talk about. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I'd like to call Sam Tallarico up now, retired PSEA leader.
Thank you, Jack. My name is Sam Tallarico, and I am retired after 35 years of teaching in the public schools, mostly at the Iroquois School District. And I am, as Jack stated, a proud member of the Pennsylvania State Education Association. We are here today for the purpose of urging the Pennsylvania legislature to pass Jake Schwab's worker safety bill, which is House Bill 1082. Which would place laborers in the public sector under the protection of the Occupational Health and Safety Administration. Since OSHA was passed in 1970, the annual number of workplace deaths in the private sector declined threefold. The goal of the legislation would be to achieve similar results for the government labor force. Implementation of this law should not, and it must not, be viewed as a burdensome regulation, but rather an invaluable protection, not only for workers, but also for the state and local governments that employ them. We believe this would be a win-win situation for all the entities involved. House Bill 1082 is first and foremost a safety bill, but it's also an economic issue as well as a fairness issue. It would result in fewer workplace injuries, fewer workmen's compensation claims, reduction of expensive litigation in our courts. We believe prevention is always cheaper than litigation. And of course, most importantly, fewer deaths in the public workplace, tragedies that can never be reversed. The cost to state and local governments would be negligible, and those costs would more than be offset by savings in legal costs, and hopefully they would eliminate the emotional toll of a tragedy in the workplace. Certainly our public employees deserve the same worker protections as those who are employed by private businesses. The importance of this bill cannot be overstated. This is simply a life and death issue. The accident that caused Jake Schwab's life was indeed foreseeable and preventable, and we cannot accept conditions that will likely result in similar catastrophic incidents. As we often say in the public schools, teacher working conditions equal student learning conditions. And likewise, in the public sector service, safer working conditions would result in higher morale and productivity. Again, there are no losers here. The time for action is long overdue. For the purpose of ensuring the health and safety of all of Pennsylvania workers, we implore the Pennsylvania legislature to pass Jake Schwab's worker safety bill, House Bill 1082, in this legislative session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I'd like to call up Scott Slauson, UE Local 506. Thanks, Scott.
Global warming is a hoax. The moon landings were faked. Elvis is still alive, and public sector employees are not protected by the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. Sounds crazy, but I know one of these statements to be true. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. I am Scott Slauson. I'm the president of UE Local 506, representing the 1,700 proud union members that work for the Wabtec Transportation Facility in Lawrence Park. Until the untimely passing of Jake Schwab, I was unaware that OSHA regulations did not apply to public sector workers. I was both shocked and horrified when it came. I was both shocked and horrified that all working people were not covered by OSHA regulations. They were not afforded the same protections when it came to their health and safety. To me, it had to be a conspiracy theory. A safe and healthy working place is and should be a fundamental right of all working people. Prior to the passage of the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, those lacking strong health and safety language had little or no protections. OSHA was a great step forward, but left many workers out, including public sector employees at the state and local levels. Well, 28, maybe 22, we're not sure, states have passed laws affording their workers OSHA-like protections. To date, Pennsylvania still has not. This is unacceptable. While only some of the jobs we performed are recognized as being dangerous, all of us can be exposed to situations which threaten the safety and the impact of our health. Today in Pennsylvania, if you are working as a private contractor or an employer, or you work for an employer, you fall under the protections of OSHA. If you're a public sector employee doing exactly the same type of work or similar work, you don't have those protections. You do, however, have an injury rate that's 64% higher than your privately employed counterpart, meaning that you're twice as likely to get hurt on the job. Again, I'm going to tell you, this is unacceptable. The cost of providing safety, as you've heard today, can be expensive, but I will also tell you the cost of not providing safety can not only be exponentially more expensive, it's also unforgivable. Since the passage of the OSHA Act, many businesses have seen dramatic decreases in workplace injuries and have enjoyed a significant reduction in their costs. They also have the peace of mind in knowing that all of their employees are going home safe and healthy to their families. I work for Wabtec, formerly GE Transportation. We have proudly been an OSHA VPP Star certified site since 2000. That means not only do we fall under the protection of OSHA, we invite them into our house. We invite them to help us improve the safety of our workplace and work with us to continually improve. I challenge the state of Pennsylvania to do the same thing for its public sector workers. It is our obligation to look after the health, safety, and well-being of all workers and to protect working people through a strengthening of our state's health and safety laws. To me, the conspiracy at this point is that nearly 5 years after the passing of Jake, and after more than 2 years of this bill being on the House floor, we still don't have the proper protections for our public sector brothers and sisters, and it's still a topic of conversation. I implore our elected legislators in the House and Senate that haven't signed on to sign on to these bills and to take the necessary action to ensure the passage of House Bill 1082 and Senate Bill 464 so that tragedies like the one that happened to Jake never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I'll call up Matt Foreman from IBEW 56, organizer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about dignity and justice. They're two powerful motivators. 49 years ago, OSHA was created. Our legislators found it necessary to carve out a public sector employees for the coverage and protection under OSHA. By doing this, they effectively eroded some of the dignity of the public sector workers, basically saying that they were not worthy of coverage, but those doing the same job in a private sector were. Dignity and justice issues are the most common reason we hear when people seek representation of a union. We believe it is not a coincidence that the biggest boom in organizing over the last few decades has been with public sector employees. When organized and negotiating a contract, we can create a safety committee to offer some protections, from offering some protections, but still does not provide OSHA protections. This injustice can be corrected. Today we have two pieces of legislation in PA which would allow coverage for public and public sector employees. House Bill 1082 and Senate Bill 464. We ask that you join the fight in the dignity and justice. Call your legislators and encourage them to support the public sector OSHA. Also, be sure to take it to your membership. Educate them. With your help, Pennsylvania can become the 29th state to pass legislation and protect the public sector employees under OSHA. We'd like to thank you for attending today, for your assistance in this very important matter. Thank you.
Well, that concludes our program today. I see a lot of friends of labor here, so thank you for coming, taking the time out to be here, and thank all of our speakers.